My name is Harper Stone. I'm 28 years old. And for most of my life, I believed love was something you earned by being better. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, in a house that always looked perfect from the outside. The lawn was trimmed like it belonged on a magazine cover. Christmas lights went up the day after Thanksgiving without fail. Our family photos showed 4 smiling faces. My father, Jacob Stone, standing tall and polished. My mother, Martha, poised and immaculate. My older sister, Kylie, glowing like she already knew the world belonged to her. And then there was me. I learned early that in our house, success wasn't about happiness. It was about prestige. Kylie was the golden child, charismatic, brilliant, destined for greatness according to my parents. By middle school, they were already predicting she'd become a surgeon. By high school, it wasn't a prediction anymore. It was a family prophecy. Me? I loved painting. I loved color, texture, imagination. I loved the quiet hum of possibility when a blank canvas sat in front of me. But art didn't come with a white coat or a prestigious title. So in my parents' world, it didn't count. I still remember the day I painted the Ozark Mountains at sunset. I was 12. The sky melted into shades of pink and burnt orange. I worked on it for weeks. When I showed my dad, he glanced at it for 3 seconds. "That's nice, Harper." Then he turned back to helping Kylie build her science fair volcano. That was the rhythm of my childhood. Her spotlight, my shadow. When I was 10, I won a regional art competition. A real one, blue ribbon and everything. I walked through the front door clutching it like proof that I mattered. Mom smiled politely. "Good job." Then she turned around and pinned Kylie's honor roll certificate on the refrigerator. I stood there holding my ribbon, feeling foolish for expecting more. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was structural. Kylie got a brand new MacBook for her AP classes. I got secondhand sketchbooks from garage sales. They drove 3 hours to watch her debate tournaments. When I had my first gallery showing at 15, they were too busy. I stood alone that night in the Springfield Community Center, my paintings propped on easels under fluorescent lighting. Other kids posed for photos with proud parents. Mine didn't even text. Later that evening, I overheard my mom telling a neighbor, "Kylie is going places. She's going to be a surgeon." I wanted to ask where that left me. High school only made it clearer. Kylie away at pre-med, collecting accolades. My parents would put her on speakerphone during dinner, hanging on to every word about hospital internships. Once, I tried to tell them I'd been accepted into an advanced art program at the local museum. "That's wonderful," Dad said distractedly. "But did you hear about Kylie's research opportunity?" I stopped trying after that. The only adult who saw me was my art teacher, Mrs. Patterson. She'd stand behind me as I worked and say softly, "You have something special, Harper. Don't let anyone shrink that." But at home, I was already shrinking. By senior year, I didn't chase their praise anymore. I poured everything into my portfolio instead. With Mrs. Patterson's help, I earned a scholarship to study graphic design at Missouri State University. When I told my parents, my mom nodded thoughtfully. "That's practical, I suppose." Practical. They took out a massive loan without hesitation for Kylie's medical school. An investment in the family's future, they called it. Apparently, I wasn't part of that future. At 18, I got invited to exhibit alongside local artists in a real Springfield gallery. I designed invitations myself and mailed them to my parents, hoping, still hoping, they'd show up. They didn't. Instead, they hosted a dinner party celebrating Kylie's acceptance into Johns Hopkins Medical School. I stood in that gallery, strangers admiring my work, complimenting my vision. I smiled. I thanked them, but inside, something cracked. That night, walking home alone under the streetlights, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they would never see me, I would build a life so solid, so undeniable, that I wouldn't need them to. What I didn't know yet was that even on my wedding day, they would still choose her, and that would finally be the moment I stopped waiting. Leaving Springfield for Missouri State University felt like stepping out of a dim room into sunlight. For the first time, I wasn't Kylie's sister. I was just Harper. I threw myself into graphic design like it was oxygen. long nights in the computer lab, fingers stained with ink and caffeine. I obsessed over typography, branding psychology, color theory. Every project felt like proof that I existed beyond my parents' narrow definition of success. That's where I met Daniel Carter. He was a teaching assistant for my Intro to Digital Media class. Calm, observant, the kind of man who didn't speak just to fill silence. The first time he reviewed my project, he didn't just say it was nice. He leaned forward, studying my layout carefully. "You have instinct," he said, "but you're holding back. Push it further. Trust yourself." No one had ever told me that before. Around the same time, I met Rena Martinez, a photography major, with sharp eyeliner and even sharper opinions. She had a laugh that filled entire rooms and a radar for injustice that could detect emotional neglect from miles away. She became my closest friend. If Daniel built my confidence quietly, Rena defended it loudly. "Your parents are blind," she'd say, slamming her coffee mug down at our favorite diner near campus. "You're killing it, Harper. They just can't see past their golden child." I'd shrug like it didn't matter, but it always mattered. By sophomore year, I landed an internship at a small advertising firm in Springfield. It wasn't glamorous. Local restaurants, car dealerships, coffee shops, but it was real. And I was good at it. I started freelancing. Logos, website layouts, promotional campaigns. My professors began recommending me to small business owners. For the first time in my life, people weren't just tolerating my passion. They were paying for it. I emailed my parents about the internship. My dad replied 2 days later. "That's nice, Harper. Have you talked to Kylie? She's dating a cardiology resident now." I stared at that email longer than I should have. Even in my victories, I was still an afterthought. Daniel wasn't like that. When a local business magazine featured one of my branding campaigns with my name printed underneath as lead designer, Daniel showed up at my apartment with takeout and sparkling cider. "Tell me everything," he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor while I paced excitedly. He asked about my creative decisions, my challenges, my vision. He saw me. That year, we started dating. He wasn't flashy. He didn't promise grand gestures. But when I doubted myself, he'd quietly remind me of my strengths, with a steadiness that made my chest ache. Rena approved immediately. "If he ever hurts you, I will ruin him," she informed him cheerfully over fries. He laughed. Understood. By junior year, I secured my first major contract, rebranding a regional restaurant chain. Months of work, late nights refining every detail. When it launched, the response was overwhelming. Glowing reviews, increased revenue for the company. My name mentioned in local business media again. This time, I called my mom instead of emailing. "I just closed a 6-figure account," I said, my voice trembling with hope. "It's huge." There was silence on the other end. "That sounds like a lot of stress, honey," she replied finally. "Kylie just started her surgical rotations. She's barely sleeping." I felt something inside me go still. Not angry, just empty. That was the last time I tried to impress them. After graduation, I accepted a full-time position at a mid-sized agency in Kansas City. Daniel moved with me. We rented a cozy apartment near the Missouri River. Life began to feel like something I built with my own hands. By 25, I was promoted to lead designer on a national clothing retailer's rebranding campaign. It was the kind of opportunity that could define a career. I didn't tell my parents. I told Daniel. I told Rena. And that was enough. Or at least, that's what I told myself. One evening, walking along the Missouri River at sunset, Daniel stopped mid-sentence. His hands were slightly shaking. "Harper," he said softly, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be you. Will you marry me?" The world felt quiet. Safe. "Yes," I whispered before he even finished. Planning our wedding became something sacred to me. Not extravagant, not competitive, just intentional. I designed the invitations myself. Elegant, minimal, soft ivory with hand-lettered script. Every detail reflected who we were. And despite everything, I hoped, Maybe this milestone would matter to them. Maybe walking down an aisle would finally make me visible. I mailed the invitations to Jacob, Martha, and Kylie with trembling hands. I even left my mom a voicemail. It would mean everything if you were there, I said. This is the most important day of my life. My dad texted back 2 days later. We'll try to make it. Kylie didn't respond at all. 3 days before the wedding, my phone rang. It was my mom. For a split second, I smiled, thinking she was calling to ask about colors or dresses. Instead, her voice was cool, detached. Harper, we're not coming to your wedding. The room tilted. What? I whispered. It's a trivial event, she said matter-of-factly. We're flying to Hawaii to celebrate Kylie's engagement to Trevor. This is a big moment for our family. Trivial. For someone at the bottom, she added. I don't remember what I said after that. I just remember Daniel catching me before I hit the floor. And somewhere deep inside, something finally began to break beyond repair. For 3 days after that phone call, I moved like someone underwater. I still had place cards to finalize, floral confirmations, a final fitting for the dress I had designed myself. Ivory silk, clean lines, delicate hand-stitched details along the waist. It was the most personal thing I had ever created, and my mother had called it trivial. Daniel never left my side. If you want to cancel, he told me quietly that night as I sat on the edge of our bed staring at nothing, we cancel. If you want to elope, we elope. If you want to stand in that venue and marry me anyway, I'll be right there. He didn't criticize them. He didn't insult them. He just chose me. That's what made it hurt even more, because I realized how simple love was supposed to be and how complicated my parents had always made it. The morning of the wedding arrived golden and calm. Kansas City's sky stretched wide and soft above the Missouri River. The venue shimmered in the late afternoon light, warm and welcoming. Rena burst into the bridal suite, carrying coffee and attitude. Okay, she announced, clapping her hands. We are not letting emotionally stunted people ruin this day. I laughed, a shaky, fragile sound, but it helped. Daniel's parents, George and Carol Carter, arrived early. Carol wrapped me in a hug so tight it felt maternal in a way that startled me. You look radiant, she whispered. We're so proud of you. Proud. That word hit somewhere deep. When it was time to walk down the aisle, my heart pounded so loudly I thought the entire room could hear it. The doors opened. Music swelled. And there were 2 empty seats in the front row. Reserved. Jacob Stone. Martha Stone. I told myself not to look. I looked anyway. The emptiness felt louder than applause. But then I saw Daniel, standing tall, eyes shining, completely steady. He didn't look past me. He didn't look distracted. He looked like I was the only person in existence. And suddenly the empty chairs lost some of their power. As I walked toward him, something inside me shifted. This was my life, not theirs. The ceremony was intimate, warm, real. Daniel's vows were simple, but devastating in their sincerity. You've spent your life trying to prove you're enough, he said softly. You always were. I didn't cry at my mother's phone call. I cried then. When it was my turn, my voice trembled but didn't break. You see me, I said, and that saved me. We kissed to cheers that felt genuine and earned. At the reception, Rena danced like she was auditioning for chaos. George gave a toast about resilience and artistry that made several guests emotional. Carol held my hands and told me I was already her daughter. I felt surrounded by warmth. And yet, late that night after the final dance, when Daniel was distracted saying goodbye to relatives, I checked my phone. I don't know why. Hope is a stubborn thing. There was a notification from my mother. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. It was a video. Hawaii. Bright blue water, palm trees swaying lazily, laughter carried on the wind. My parents stood on a pristine beach, tropical drinks in hand. Kylie glowed beside her fiancé, Trevor Hamilton, a fellow medical resident. The caption read, "Celebrating our star's engagement in paradise. So proud of our future doctor. Star." Not a single mention of my wedding, not even a polite acknowledgement. I watched the video twice, then a third time. In the background, I heard my father's voice say, "This is what real success looks like. My hands started shaking. Daniel walked back toward me, smiling, then stopped when he saw my face. What happened? I handed him the phone without speaking. He watched silently. His jaw tightened. That's cruel, he said quietly. Cruel, not accidental, not thoughtless, deliberate. I looked up at the fairy lights strung across the reception space, at our friends laughing nearby, at Rena arguing passionately with a distant cousin about something trivial. This room was filled with people who chose to be here, and yet the absence still echoed. I kept thinking, I whispered, maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd show up. Daniel cupped my face gently. You don't need them to witness your life for it to matter. But I had needed them. For 28 years, I had needed them. That night, as we drove back to our apartment, I stared out the window at the dark Missouri skyline. Something inside me wasn't just hurt, it was awakening. Because if they could look at their daughter getting married and call it trivial, what would they ask of me next? I didn't have to wait long to find out. Exactly 1 week later, my phone rang. It was my father, and he wasn't calling to apologize. 1 week into married life, I was still getting used to the quiet joy of waking up beside Daniel and knowing I had chosen something steady. The apartment smelled like coffee and new beginnings. My wedding dress hung carefully in the closet, preserved like a relic of something sacred. That's when my phone rang. Dad. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Daniel glanced up from the kitchen counter. You don't have to answer. I swallowed. No, I said quietly. I want to. I stepped onto the balcony and picked up. Harper, Jacob Stone began. No greeting, no acknowledgement of my wedding. His voice was clipped and businesslike. We need to discuss the loan situation. Loan? My stomach tightened. What loan? I asked carefully. He sighed like I was being difficult. The $25,000 your mother and I covered for your college tuition. It's time you start contributing. We need the funds available. Available. For what? I asked, though I already knew. For Kylie's wedding, he said, as if it were obvious. It's going to be a significant event. There are expectations. It's only fair you help the family. Fair. The word felt obscene. I leaned against the railing, gripping it so tightly my knuckles whitened. I paid my own student loans, I said slowly. Every payment. On time. He dismissed that instantly. We handled some of it early on. You probably don't remember. I remembered every payment, every freelance project, every double shift. Every night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. designing logos so I could afford tuition. I'll check the records, I said evenly. You should want to help your sister, he added sharply. This is important for the family's reputation. Reputation. More important than my wedding. More important than me. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. But not from sadness, from clarity. Daniel was waiting when I stepped back inside. What did he want? They think I owe them $25,000, I said flatly, for a loan that doesn't exist. They want it for Kylie's wedding. Daniel's expression darkened. That's manipulation, he said, and it's desperate. That night, I pulled out every financial document I owned. Old loan statements, bank confirmations, payment histories. I built spreadsheets, cross-referenced dates, verified account numbers. By midnight, there was only one conclusion. I had paid every cent myself. The next morning, I called my bank directly. The representative confirmed what I already knew. All loans under your name were paid in full. There's no outstanding balance. And there's no parental co-signature or transfer on record. No loan, no debt, just a lie. I sat there after the call ended, staring at the wall. It wasn't about the money. It was about the audacity. They had skipped my wedding to celebrate Kylie on a beach, then turned around and tried to charge me for the privilege of being the less important daughter. That afternoon, I called him back. He answered on the second ring. Yes? I checked everything, I said calmly. There was never a loan. I paid for my education entirely on my own. Silence. Then a shuffle of papers, as if he could fabricate documentation through noise alone. You must be mistaken, he said finally. Your mother remembers. I spoke to the bank. Another pause. I could hear my mom's voice faintly in the background, whispering. encouraging. Kylie's wedding is a major event, Dad pressed, irritation creeping into his tone. You should want to contribute. She's representing this family at a high level. And there it was, representing, as if I had never done that. As if my career, my success, my marriage, all of it were footnotes beneath Kylie's white coat. A strange calm settled over me. I thought about Hawaii, about the caption, "Our Star." I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding and my mother's voice calling it trivial. For someone at the bottom, something inside me hardened. "Don't contact me about trivial matters," I said quietly. There was stunned silence. "Harper," he began. "I'm done," I continued, my voice steady. "I don't owe you money. I don't owe Kylie funding for her wedding. And I don't owe this family my dignity." "You're being dramatic," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm being clear." He tried again, his tone shifting from authority to frustration. "You're overreacting. We're your parents." And for the first time in my life, that sentence didn't carry power. "Yes," I said softly, "you are." And then I hung up. My heart was racing. My hands were cold. But underneath it all, there was relief. Daniel watched me carefully from across the room. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "For the first time," I admitted, "I think I might be." That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. It wasn't just about refusing the money. It was about something bigger. They would never stop. There would always be another demand, another comparison. Another reminder that I was second, unless I ended it completely. The next morning, I called Rena. She listened in silence as I told her everything. Then she said, "It's time." Time for what? To stop waiting for them to change. The word echoed. Stop. Waiting. I had spent 28 years hoping they would wake up and see me. They never had. And maybe they never would. That afternoon, I searched for a therapist in Kansas City. If I was going to end this cycle, I wanted to do it right. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. I didn't know it yet, but writing that final email would be harder than confronting my father. And hitting send would change my life forever. Her office overlooked a quiet stretch of downtown Kansas City. Brick buildings, steady traffic, the hum of a city that didn't know or care about the private wars being fought inside its apartments. Dr. Rebecca Thompson greeted me with a calm smile and eyes that felt observant without being intrusive. "So," she said gently once we were seated, "tell me what brought you here." I didn't plan to cry. I cried anyway, not loud, not dramatic, just years of quiet swallowing finally rising to the surface. I told her about Springfield, about Kylie's science fair trophies and my blue ribbon, about the gallery openings they skipped, about Hawaii, about the fake loan, about the word trivial. She listened without interrupting, just small nods, occasional clarifying questions. When I finished, she folded her hands together thoughtfully. "Harper," she said softly, "you've been trying to earn unconditional love from people who only offer conditional approval." That sentence felt like someone turning a light on in a dark room. "I kept thinking if I succeeded enough," I whispered, "you'd finally be chosen." I nodded. She didn't pity me. She didn't villainize them either. "Setting boundaries isn't about punishing them," she continued. "It's about protecting yourself." Protecting. No one had ever framed it that way before. That evening, Daniel and I sat at our kitchen table, with my laptop open between us. The cursor blinked on a blank screen. 2. Jacob Stone, Martha Stone, Kylie Stone. My hands hovered over the keyboard. "What if they think I'm overreacting?" I murmured. Daniel reached across the table, lacing his fingers through mine. "Harper," he said quietly, "they've had 28 years. This isn't sudden. It's overdue." Rena arrived halfway through, armed with takeout and righteous fury. "I volunteer to press send if you freeze," she announced, dropping onto the couch. Despite everything, I laughed. Then I began typing. I didn't attack. I didn't insult. I stated facts. "Your actions over the years have made it clear where I stand in this family." I described the favoritism, the dismissal, the wedding, the fabricated loan. Each sentence felt like lifting a stone I'd been carrying in my chest. I am no longer willing to accept conditional love or manipulation. My throat tightened as I typed the final lines. "Do not contact me again. Any future attempts to reach me will be ignored. I stared at it. It looked stark, cold, but also honest. Daniel squeezed my hand gently. Read it out loud. I did. My voice shook at first, then steadied. Dr. Thompson reviewed it in our next session, suggesting only one adjustment. Make sure this is about your needs, she said, not their failures. So I revised one sentence. I am choosing to step away for my own emotional well-being. Choosing. That word felt powerful. The night I finally sent it, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. Daniel sat beside me. Rena stood behind me like a protective storm cloud. Whenever you're ready, Daniel said softly. I took one last breath and pressed send. For a split second, panic flared. What had I done? Then something unexpected washed over me. Stillness. I immediately blocked their phone numbers, their emails, their social media accounts. Every digital doorway sealed. Rena hugged me so tightly I nearly lost balance. You just chose yourself, she whispered. Daniel kissed my forehead. I'm proud of you. Proud. There it was again. And this time, I believed it. The next morning, I woke up expecting chaos. Angry voicemails, accusations, guilt, nothing. By afternoon, still nothing. Days passed. Silence. Kylie didn't reach out. My parents didn't respond. It was as if I had quietly stepped off their stage, and they simply moved on with the show. That realization hurt more than anger would have, because anger would have meant I mattered. Instead, there was just absence. In therapy, Dr. Thompson nodded when I told her. Sometimes, she said gently, the silence confirms what you already knew, that I was never their priority. Grief doesn't always come as sobbing. Sometimes it's quieter, an ache when you see other daughters laughing with their mothers in grocery stores. A pause when someone casually mentions family dinner. But alongside the grief was something new. Peace. No more bracing myself for comparison. No more rehearsing conversations in my head. No more wondering if I'd finally be enough. Daniel and I began building rhythms that belonged only to us. Sunday morning coffee on the balcony. Evening walks along the river. Laughter that didn't have an undercurrent of competition. Rena visited often, filling our apartment with noise and color. George and Carol invited us for dinner regularly, never once mentioning my parents unless I did first. And slowly, the wound stopped bleeding. 6 months later, I stood in a hospital room holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pale pink. Daniel stood beside me, his eyes glassy. She's perfect, he whispered. We named her Grace. Because grace is something freely given, not earned. As I held her, her tiny fingers curling instinctively around mine, something inside me shifted completely. I looked at her and knew, with terrifying clarity, that I would never make her compete for love. She would not earn affection through achievement. She would not be compared. She would be chosen. Every day, unconditionally. And in that moment, I understood something that 28 years had never taught me. Family isn't defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who shows up. And I was finally ready to build mine intentionally. The first night we brought Grace home, I barely slept. Not because she cried, though she did, softly, like a confused little bird adjusting to the world, but because I couldn't stop watching her. Daniel had fallen asleep in the armchair beside the crib, one hand still resting protectively on the edge, as if he could shield her even in his dreams. The room glowed faintly from the nightlight. Grace stirred. I leaned over and gently brushed my finger across her tiny cheek. You will never wonder if you're enough, I whispered. And I meant it. Motherhood did something therapy alone couldn't. It rewired my understanding of love. I used to believe love was something hierarchical, awarded to the most impressive, the most accomplished, the one who made the family look best. But when Grace squeezed my finger with her whole tiny hand, I realized love wasn't competitive. It was abundant, and it was deliberate. My career continued to grow in ways I once thought I needed my parents to witness. New clients, national campaigns, recognition within the industry. But the applause that mattered most came from home. Daniel would review drafts late at night asking thoughtful questions the way he always had. George and Carol framed one of my design spreads and hung it in their living room without me even asking. Rena remained a constant force, showing up with coffee during deadline weeks and baby blankets during new mother exhaustion. "You broke a generational pattern," she told me once, rocking Grace in our living room. "That's bigger than any campaign." Maybe she was right. Boundaries don't erase grief, she reminded me. They simply stop ongoing harm. Sometimes, if Kylie ever mentioned my name between wedding planning sessions and surgical rotations. But then I would look at Grace, or at Daniel laughing in the kitchen, and the wondering would fade. Because I was building it around intention. One afternoon, nearly a year after I sent that email, my cousin Beth reached out. She'd heard pieces of the story through extended family channels. "I just want you to know," she said over coffee, "not everyone agreed with how they treated you." Her voice carried a quiet sincerity. It didn't reopen wounds. It simply reminded me that I hadn't imagined the imbalance, that I hadn't exaggerated the hurt. Beth became the kind of cousin who checked in regularly, who asked about Grace, who sent messages on random Tuesdays that said, "Thinking of you," and that felt more like family than blood ever had. Grace's first birthday was small and joyful. Daniel grilled in the backyard of George and Carol's house. Rena hung handmade decorations with glitter that would never fully come out of the grass. Carol baked a cake shaped like a tiny paint palette, her idea. When it was time to sing, everyone gathered close. I caught Daniel watching me instead of the cake. "What?" I mouthed. He shook his head, smiling softly. "You're happy," he said later that night after Grace had fallen asleep. I paused. I was, not because everything had been perfect, but because I had stopped begging for love from people who withheld it. I had chosen differently, and that choice had reshaped my entire world. Sometimes I think back to the girl standing alone in that Springfield gallery at 15, the girl clutching her blue ribbon, the girl refreshing her phone on her wedding night, hoping for a congratulations that never came. If I could reach back through time, I would tell her this: you are not invisible. You were simply looking in the wrong direction. The people who were meant to see you were still ahead. I don't hate my parents. Hate would mean I still orbit them emotionally. Instead, I feel something quieter: distance, acceptance. They chose prestige over presence, reputation over relationship, and I chose differently. Grace will grow up in a home where success isn't measured by titles or public applause. It will be measured by kindness, by consistency, by showing up. Daniel and I made a promise the night she was born, whispered between exhaustion and awe, that our home would never be a stage for comparison. It would be a refuge. And every time Grace runs into my arms without hesitation, I know we're keeping that promise. Looking back now, I'm not grateful for the pain itself, but I am grateful for what it forced me to confront. It forced me to stop waiting, to stop competing, to stop trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. I built my own table instead. And at that table sit Daniel, Grace, Rena, George, Carol, Beth, and yes, even Dr. Thompson, whose steady guidance helped me untangle years of quiet damage. They are my family. Not because we share DNA, but because we choose each other every day. I am no longer the daughter trying to impress. I am a wife, a mother, an artist, a woman who knows her worth without asking for permission. And if you are standing in your own gallery tonight, metaphorically or literally, waiting for someone to notice your work, your effort, your heart, look around. See who is already there. That's your family. That's your foundation. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop chasing approval and start choosing peace.